Hi and welcome. I'm Colleen and I'll be guiding your Relax and Restore yoga class today, a blend of yin and restorative yoga postures. For your class today, you'll want a bolster, a couple blocks, definitely a strap. And if you have a sukha mat or an additional cushion for a little extra padding on the knees, some of the postures that we'll be exploring, we will be knelt. And so having a little extra cushioning is just great. And if you don't have a sukha mat, a little gardening kneeling pad is really great. You can also use pillows or even fold up a couple towels just to have a little added cush there. All right, so to begin with, for our first posture, we'll be setting up just like this. So you'll have your bolster on a little bit of an incline. I'm using blocks just because my bolster is a little bit more on the thin side. If you have one of the really big, thick, round bolsters, you might be able to just skip the blocks altogether. And setting any additional props off to the side for the time being. And then what you'll do is you'll come to a seated position with your hips in front of the bolster. I usually leave a little bit of space in between my buttocks and the bolster itself. Just creates a little less pinch in the low back, a little more space for the low back to lengthen out. And then from there, you can begin to descend, laying all the way back. Make sure that the upper back, the head and neck is fully supported by the props underneath. If you need to move your ponytail, the way you can always do that too. And then from there, any variation of the legs is welcome. So you could have the knees bent, feet flat onto the floor. This might offer a little more stability to the low back and to the pelvis. So if you have any tenderness going on in the low back, this might be a great option for you. You can knock the knees inward, or alternatively, you can take the soles of the feet together and let the knees fan out to the side. If you're in this variation, you might like pillows to the outer thighs as well, just filling in the gap between the outer thigh and the floor, just a little added support. Alternatively, if you're feeling like a little release to the front of the hip flexors, you might decide to then stretch the legs long. Whichever variation that you've chosen, make sure that, again, there's no pinchiness to the low back. And if there is, it just means something needs to change. Again, here you could inch your hips a little further away from the bolster or lower the incline of the props. And then once you've found a sweet spot to settle in, as a little personal adjustment, walk your shoulder blades a little closer together and down the back body. If it's comfortable for your shoulders, your hands, your wrists, let the palms face open and feel free to take up a little bit of space. From there, blink the eyes closed and begin to navigate your awareness inward. Notice the subtle movements of the body that is created by the breath. Feel into all that is expanding as you inhale and all that is softening, releasing as you exhale. And the simple act of observing the breath will naturally slow and settle the mind. Can serve as an anchor or a tether so that when the mind becomes busy or starts to run wild with thought, it's something to come back to refocus on. The breath itself will naturally lengthen. The heart rate, you might observe it starting to slow down, and the body beginning to calm. Let this be your foundation of all of your postures here, the mind concentrated in the breath, and see what comes from that practice. It's not that the mind won't think or plan or become distracted. That's what the mind does. It tries to figure it all out. The mind, the intellect also needs time to rest. And so let yourself off the hook. Choose to come back to the breath every time you find your mind thinking or planning. And we'll be here for another 20 more breaths, give or take. You can leave the count entirely to me. Just rest, breathe, notice, and feel. If the knees are drawn wide, gently assist them back together. You might even toe heel the feet a little wider so that the knees knock slightly inward, creating a slight internal rotation of the thighs, as well as a little adduction to offset the external opening of the hips. The legs are stretched long, just simply walk the feet in till the knees are bent. And then moving slowly and gently, begin to transition onto your right side. Settle there for a few moments in the fetal position. And then, with the strength of your hands, begin to transition your way forward and up for a moment into kneeling. You can then set your bolster off to the side, set your blocks off to the side. And here's the good news, you're heading right back onto your back. So before you head onto your back, make sure you have your strap handy. Lay all the way back. And then place the strap across the mound of the right foot. So right across where your pedal would go. You might wrap the strap a couple times around the hands to create a good firm anchor. And then play around with the depth of the stretch. So you can find out where you feel a generous amount of sensation through the back of the right leg. Perhaps you might feel it in the lower leg as well. Note if your low back is starting to flatten out and the hips are peeling way up off the floor. That means you're recruiting movement from the low back. Here we ultimately want to isolate the hamstring, calf, and Achilles. And so, in other words, make sure there's just enough room so that the small or your hand can fit right underneath the small of your back, or almost like you could roll a little pea underneath. Then from there, once you've found your sweet spot, stay just as you are. Your choice to keep the left knee bent for added stability, or you can stretch the left leg long. This can serve as a nice little release through the front of the left leg. And then blink the eyes closed and send your awareness into your breath once again. Notice if the leg is shaking and see if you can rewind the stretch till the shaking is dissolved. If the stretch feels complacent, then reach in a little further. And when the will of the mind tells you to pull harder or this needs to be any different from what it is, just simply notice that and explore what it's like to let that thought go. Alternatively, returning your attention back into the breath. Breathe in, breathe out again. Feel the body accommodating the breath in. Feel it expand. Feel the body softening, easing the breath out. Encourage the shoulders to soften, even the sides of the neck, the jaw, encouraging ever more easeful passage of the breath in the body. Take the strap now into the right hand and begin to guide the right leg open to the right side about 2/3 of the way. If this feels rather intense, you might reach for your block or your bolster and place it to the outer right thigh, just to have something to rest into. This can often encourage the body to relax more effectively, more efficiently. Just having that added little support, the body doesn't have to put so much tension into the muscles to support the joint. In fact, having a little bit of something to rest into encourages the musculature to relax so that everything can begin to unravel and unwind. And now guide the right leg back overhead. Switch the strap now into the left hand and begin to guide the right leg about 2/3 of the way over to the left side. Then pause there. If the left knee is bent, straighten the left leg if you haven't already. Encourage now your right hip to get a little bit heavier. In fact, you can even bring your right thumb to your right hip crease and draw the hip down. while simultaneously reaching your right foot to the upper left corners of your room. This is now targeting the outer right hip, the IT band. You might feel a subtle twist through the spine. More than ever, direct your attention back to the breath. When we focus the mind's attention to the breath, it helps to activate the parasympathetic nervous system. So it shifts the body out of fight or flight into rest and digest. And this is where the deep connective tissues can then start to relax, release, and lengthen. Encourage the jaw to remain relaxed, the breath steady and even. Slowly guide the right leg back overhead. Pause here for one more breath. And then carefully release the strap from the right leg and lower the right leg alongside the left. Take note of how you feel right side, left side, how you feel through the outer hip, the low back, even the front of the hip. And then walking the feet in, knees bent to begin. Extend the left leg overhead and place your strap across the mound of the left foot. Again, wrap the strap around the hands as an option. Little micro bend into the knee, a little flexion to the ankle so that the heel is reaching a little bit higher than the toes. Reach till you feel an adequate sense of sensation through the back of the left leg. And then your choice with a slight arc through the low back. You can keep your right knee bent or lengthen the right leg long, your choice. And then blink the eyes closed. And as you breathe here, you might notice how there's almost a wave like quality to the breath. Feel it roll and crest its way in. Feel the wave of breath retreat out. Feel the belly, the ribs, and eventually the chest to expand to accommodate the breath in. And feel the chest, the ribs, the belly eventually to shrink back in to accommodate the breath out. And now gather the strap into the left hand and begin to guide the left leg open about 2/3 of the way. Again, you might reach for a block to place it to the outer left thigh. Notice if your right hip is lifting and twisting to the left side. And if so, option here to press your right thigh bone a little more towards the floor. If the right knee is bent, you can also let it fall slightly open to the right side. And this will help to anchor the pelvis so that the release is isolated to the left inner groin or left inner thigh. Check back in with the breath, and if it's shallowed in any way, enliven it once again. Slowly guide your left leg overhead. Switch the strap into the right hand. Straighten, lengthen your right leg long. And now guide your left leg again about 2/3 of the way over to the right side. Again, here, a slight little adjustment. Draw your left hip down while simultaneously extending your left heel towards the upper right corners of the room. Steady the breath once again. And now gently guide the left leg back overhead. Reach the toes momentarily over the nose. And carefully slip the strap off the left foot and lower it alongside the right. Take a moment to simply notice, to feel, taking inventory of anything that may have shifted or changed, and the potential that is present when you take time, turn inside, rest and breathe. Then walk the feet in, feet flat onto the floor, knees bent. From there, give yourself a great big squeeze, hug your knees into the chest, further decompressing the low back and spine. A little massage as well to the abdominals. You can add in a little bit of movement here, a few circles with the knees, or rest in place. And then either rocking left and right or up and down the length of the spine, make your way to kneeling. This is where you can reach for your suka mat or some extra padding for the knees. You can always fold in the outer edge of the mat as well. And place your blocks to the front corners of your mat. And if you wish, have your strap within reach as well. I personally like to flip my blocks to the highest setting. You can play around. I've also got little T-Rex arms. So if you prefer, you can lengthen them. You might not even need them. And then place your right foot in between your hands. Walk your right ankle just a little ways forward from your knee so that the knee is either on top of the ankle or slightly back. Slide your left leg as far back as it will reach. And one of my favorite little adjustments is to just simply draw the heel to the buttock and then set the foot down. Sometimes that'll help to move the patella or the kneecap out of the way and helps to alleviate some of the pressure off the knee. Then back the hips up an inch or two and create a little scissor hug of the inner thighs. So you'll draw your right hip back, nudge your left hip forward, and aim your tailbone towards the earth. So it creates an even and subtle pelvic tilt. With that alignment, start to inch your left hip forward without collapsing the low back and spine. In fact, you'll have a little bit of tonicity in the core and inner thighs. And then steady the gaze or close them all together. Redirect your attention into the breath. These holds will be a little bit shorter in length. And so you can feel comfortable diving into a little more depth. The sensation feels like it's too much. Rewind the posture till it feels sustainable. If it feels sensational and there's an adequate sensation, a challenge, let this be an opportunity for you to deepen your relationship with the breath. Concentrate fully on the inhale. Concentrate fully on the exhale. Notice all that is expanding with each breath in, all that is softening as you breathe out. One more cycle of breath, just like that. Relax the shoulders, the jaw. Good. And now slowly begin to blink the eyes open. Begin to shift your hips back. Take your blocks with you. So heel the right foot a little ways further forward and flip the toes skyward. Keep a little micro bend in the right knee. Aim your tailbone straight back home. And actually, imagine you could flip it over your head. This will help to protect the low back. And then extend your sternum forward and drape your rib cage down the length of the right thigh till you feel a generous amount of sensation through the back of the right leg. Breathe in, breathe out again. Quiet the eyes, and the mind will follow. Relax the shoulders, add a little micro bend into the elbows. Blink the eyes open. Take your hands to the inside of your right leg. Rebend your right knee and toe heel your right foot just a little bit wider, maybe even a little wider than the fleshy part of your hip. Shift the hips back once again, a little flex of the ankle, and then tip your toes towards the right any amount till you feel a little sensation, not only into the hamstring, so the back of the right leg, but also to the outer right leg as well. Then once again, imagine you could flip your tail over your head. Bend your sternum forward and this time hinge a little bit further forward out of the hip. Again, keep extending the right heel forward while drawing the right hip back, toes tilted to the right side. Three more breaths. You can leave the count to me. Just continue to breathe. And now keeping the right toes tilted slightly to the right, walk your hands a little ways further forward and then begin to bend your right knee in the direction of your right middle toe. And so what you want to avoid is having the knee move past the ankle or that the knee is outside of the ankle. We want it in the same direction. And then from there, let the right thigh begin to rotate open to the right side. Option to stay exactly as you are, a little more upright through the spine. Keep the lower ribs cinched in, tailbone long. Option number two would be to reach back with your right hand and take hold of your left foot. If the left foot seems far away, then you can always use your strap to loop up the left foot and draw your heel towards your buttock. This will help to release the quadricep, the hip flexor. And then you can add a little twist, a little rotation if you're in this variation where the right ribs draw back and the left ribs roll forward. Two more breaths. Through the back foot, gently release it. Square the torso forward. We'll be here for a good 5 more breaths, evening out the hips. Option here to lower all or part way onto the forearms. Maybe meet yourself halfway with your blocks or lower forearms all the way to the mat. You can always add a little bit of micro movement here, massaging the hips, encouraging the right thigh bone to roll open, ensuring that the sensation is primarily in the hips and that there's no negative sensation, no tugging, pulling, or pain whatsoever in the knee. If there is, rewind the posture to where that sensation is alleviated. Relax the jaw, let the heart melt and the shoulders to soften. Just a couple more breaths here. And now rise back up onto the hands. Toe heel your right foot back to center and then all the way across your mat till your right shin is at about a 45-degree angle, give or take. And then from there, you can slide the left leg a fair ways further back. You can keep your Sukha mat in place or move it out to the side. We'll be settling in here for sleeping swan just for about a minute. And then your choice. You can use your blocks, rest your forearms onto them. You might place your, oh, say hi to kitty cat. One of my favorite parts about at-home yoga is that you never know who's going to show up. This is Venice, by the way. And so you can then lower your forearms onto your blocks from there, or onto your bolster, or lay forward onto your forearms. Relax the jaw. If you prefer pigeon or sleeping swan from your back, you can always do a reclined figure four. Last few breaths here. And now gently rise back up onto your hands. You can press back into a three-legged table or a three-legged dog, whichever feels most enjoyable at this time. Integrate any free movement, pedaling out the feet, swaying out through the hips. And then slowly return back onto the mat, or knees to the mat. Blocks to the front corners of the mat, and then you can have your Sukha mat for a little added cushioning to the knees. And then from there, place your left foot to the front of the mat in between your blocks. Slide your right leg about as far back as it can reach. Little self adjustment of drawing the heel to the buttock just to move the patellar out of the way. Rewind the hips and pelvis, scissor the inner thighs, aim your tailbone long, heart to the sky. And then let the hips start to sling forward, aiming the right hip forward, the left hip slightly back, a slight tonicity and scissoring of the inner thigh, navel to spine. And now breathe. Unlock the jaw and soften even the skin on the face. Let it grow soft and supple. And now slowly start to shift the hips back. Take your blocks with you. Scissor the inner thigh, so left hip back, right hip forward. Flip your tail over your head, extend your sternum forward, and then gently drape your torso down the length of the left leg. A little micro bend in the left knee can go a long way to protect the low back and spine and to isolate the release through the left hamstring. Ensuring that this isn't tugging or pulling from the SI, so right along the sacrum and the iliac crest. For me personally, I'm a little bit locked up on the left side. And so when I explore this pose, it's really easy for me to start to pull from the low back and the SI. And so it's imperative that I fine tune it to isolate the hamstring. And the more you explore these postures, the time within them, the relationship that we come into with sensation and the breath, the more we come to know our bodies, you can always modify and adjust the practice so that it's just right for you. What you do on the left side might be a little different than the right. How you use props, even approach the pose. Begin to now shift your way forward. Rebend your left knee and take the blocks to the inside of the left foot. Toe heel your left foot a little wider, probably as wide as the fleshy part of your hip, or even as wide or even further off the mat. Tip your left toes towards the corners of the room and then draw the hips back once again. Send your tail back, your heart forward, and then gently hinge forward. And this will target the hamstring, the back of the left leg, as well as the outer left leg a little differently. If being in stillness is challenging, just notice that. In fact, it's not uncommon to resist the stillness, the depth of the sensation. But with more practice, more time, more repetition, in time, it becomes easier and easier. Not that the practice isn't still challenging, but there's more familiarity, more ease that comes in time. Just a couple more breaths here. Begin to rebend your left knee in the direction of your left toes. So the toes aren't pointing forward if the knee is coming out to the side. Want the knee moving in the direction of the middle toe. Keep a little flexion to the ankle so that as the thigh bone starts to roll open, the movement is coming from the inner thigh rather than recruiting movement from the ankle. Now you can stay here. This is plenty. The option is also there to rotate and twist. You could bring your left hand to the left thigh or reach back and take hold of your right foot. Keep a slight tonicity of the core, cinch the ribs back in. Steady the mind's attention back into the breath. Breathe in and notice all that is expanding with your inhale. Breathe out and notice all that is softening with your exhale. What can you let go of in this moment? Is it effort? Is it expectation? Or maybe a thought? One more inhale here. And as you exhale, release the back foot, square off the torso. We'll be here for another couple or another several breaths. Again, you can stay upright, or the option is there to lower onto your forearms, either all the way onto the mat or halfway with block. Again, notice what's happening in the hips, the spine, and ensure that there's no tugging, no pain, no pulling from the knee. The heart melts and the shoulders soften wherever you are. And breathe in. You notice a subtle pause right there at the top of the breath. Breathe out till again you notice a subtle pause at the bottom of the breath. Notice all the spaces in between. Rise all the way back up from there. Toe heel your left foot back to center. And then all the way across till it's at about a 45-degree angle, give or take. Slide your right leg as far back as it will reach, your choice to keep or set your cushion to the side. Now here, if there's a lot of space between your left buttock and the floor, you can always fill in the gap with props of your choosing. You can use props to support the upper body as you lay forward, maybe onto a set of blocks, bolster, whichever feels most supportive at this time. Now slowly start to rise back up onto the hands. And again, here you could press back into a three-legged table, a three-legged dog, or any other shape that you might create along the way. The objective here is just to gently unravel the posture where you were just in and to really wash any after image of the pose away. Few little hip circles can feel nice as well. And so give yourself permission to explore. Try not to think too much about it. Just move in a way that feels genuine for you. And then from there, bring the knees together. Sit your hips back towards the heels. Reach for your bolster and place it in front of you. And if you have a little skinny bolster like this one, you might use your block here. So a couple options. You could take an embryo pose. Usually at this time, after all the opening of the hips, I'm looking to draw the thighs inward. So with embryo, you could rest forward onto your props, stretch the arms back or forward, whichever feels best for you. If you're craving child's pose with the knees drawn a little wider, then by all means, just simply bring the toes to touch, draw the knees wide, and then rest your way forward. Again, options to take the arms forward or back, whichever feels most supportive for you at this time. Last full breath in. Last full breath in. And begin to rise back up into kneeling. If you're craving a big old stretch, you might interlace your hands overhead, maybe stretch a little bit left and right. A few little arm circles, especially if the arms were drawn back. And then for our final resting pose for Shavasana, to further release any tension from the low back, you can set your props up in a little Stonehenge. So I have two blocks and bolster right on top. You can also just drape your legs over a bolster or your favorite piece of furniture, maybe an ottoman, a sofa, or even explore legs up the wall. And then settle your hips close to your props. Drape your legs over and on top, and then lay all the way onto your back. A little self adjustment of scooping the hips slightly under can help to further lengthen the spine. Take the legs a couple times, unraveling any tension. Walk the shoulders underneath, let them cradle the base of the heart. Feel free to take up space so you could have the hands wide, or if you're looking for a little heart opening integrated in here, you could always cactus the arms and let gravity unravel any tension from the chest and from the front of the shoulders. And then blink your eyes closed and begin to direct your awareness inward. Savor this next breath in. And then allow for an open mouth exhale. Two more just like that. Savor the breath in. Open mouth, exhale all the way out. One more at your own pace here. And then let go of all conscious control of the breath and just allow the breath to breathe you. Feel your body letting go, almost like it was falling through water or floating through the sky. Let this time be effortless. Just rest and breathe. Om Namah Shivaya. Gurave Sachidananda Saye Nishprakanshaya Shantaya Nearby Tejase Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Begin to deepen the breath. Reawaken the body fully with a big, old, luxurious stretch. Eventually, hug your knees into your chest. Give yourself a warm embrace, a gentle squeeze. And then again, either rocking up and down the length of the spine or left and right, rocking over to the side. Eventually, make your way to seated. Once you arrive and seated, either place your hands over your heart or into prayer and bow slightly inward and acknowledge the you that showed up on his or her mat today. You took time to nourish, to reset, and to breathe. Thank you so much for practicing here today. Carry with you this practice off the mat and into your days. Thank you so much. Namaste.